I am Sarah, 25 years old, living quietly in my own home. Yet my family calls me useless. They didn't know that I secretly contributed $2,500 every month until I left and set a trap that caused the whole family to panic. The secret behind that action will shock you. I used to think my home was just quiet, but quiet has a funny way of turning into lonely when no one really sees you. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, where the streets were lined with old oak trees, and every house looked like it belonged in a faded postcard porches with creaky swings, chipped white fences, neighbors who waved but never asked questions. Ours was one of those homes, a little wooden house with peeling blue paint and windows that fogged up in winter. To outsiders, we were a typical middle-class family. But inside, things were complicated. My parents, Robert and Helen, were the type of people who believed in tradition, good grades, Sunday dinners, smiling politely. They wanted a daughter who liked school dances, wore dresses, and dreamed of becoming a nurse or a teacher. Instead, they got me a 16-year-old girl who spent hours tinkering with old motherboards, writing lines of code, and staying up until 3 a.m., watching videos about quantum computing. I wasn't normal to them. I wasn't even close. My room was my only refuge, small, barely big enough to stretch my arms in. But it was mine. Posters of sci-fi films covered the walls. Interstellar, Blade Runner, and that old black and white one my dad always said looked too weird. A half-finished PC tower sat next to my desk, wires spilling out like veins. The hum of the fan and the soft blue glow from my monitors were the only things that made me feel alive. At school, I was invisible unless someone needed help resetting their phone. They called me Tech Goblin behind my back. Once, someone shoved a broken calculator into my locker with a note, "Fix this, freak." I laughed at it outwardly, but that night, I stayed up trying to fix it, just to prove I could. At home, things weren't much better. My parents didn't understand why I was wasting my time on stupid machines. My mom would say things like, "Sarah, no one marries a girl who stares at screens all day, while scrubbing the same plate over and over." My dad didn't say much. He'd just sigh and ask, "What are your grades looking like?" even though we both already knew the answer. They were slipping. Algebra was fine, but English I couldn't concentrate when all I wanted was to learn how to build a custom Linux kernel. My teachers gave up before I did. I stopped raising my hand. I stopped speaking at all. Really. It was easier that way. There was only one person who never treated me like I was broken. James. My older brother was 5 years ahead of me and already out of high school. He still lived with us while working part-time at the auto shop down the street. He had grease-stained hands and a laugh that could crack silence like a baseball through glass. Every few nights, he'd knock on my door with a cold can of Coke and say something ridiculous like, "You ever think robots will take over the world because of your code?" I'd pretend to be annoyed, but I always smiled. He didn't understand everything I was into, but he never mocked it either. He once stayed up an entire night helping me sort tiny screws and plastic parts because I had dropped the motherboard tray and lost a connector. "It's like playing Lego for adults," he said, grinning. But even James couldn't protect me from what happened that night. It was a Wednesday, I think. I had just finished configuring a used graphics card I'd found on eBay and managed to get my ancient rig running a new 3D rendering tool. I was excited, giddy, even. It felt like something had finally clicked. For once, I wasn't a failure. I was good at something. I didn't hear my parents come in. The door slammed open like thunder. My mother's eyes went straight to the screen. "It's past midnight," she shouted. "We told you no more computer nonsense after dinner." Before I could explain, before I could even breathe, my father marched in, yanked the laptop's power cable from the socket, and stormed out of the room with it under his arm. "It's gone, Sarah, until you grow up and start acting like a real student," he said, not even looking back. I sat there frozen. For about 10 seconds. I said nothing. Then it hit me like a punch to the stomach. I cried. Not quietly. Not politely. I sobbed into my pillow until the fabric was soaked and the taste of salt burned my lips. It wasn't just a laptop, it was the only thing in this world that made me feel like I mattered. Maybe they didn't know that. Maybe they didn't care. About an hour later, just as I was drifting into a haze of exhaustion and heartbreak, I heard a knock. Soft. 3 taps. James. He didn't say anything when he came in. Just walked to my desk, slipped the laptop out from under his hoodie, and placed it gently next to my keyboard. He looked at me for a moment, eyes a little sad, and said, "Don't let them take away the thing you love. You're not broken, Sarah. You're just ahead of your time." That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up staring at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my tears. Not coding, not fixing anything. Just trying to believe that maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't broken. Not completely. I dropped out of high school when I was 17. There was no big argument, no dramatic farewell. I just stopped showing up. By that point, I already knew the classrooms weren't meant for someone like me. My guidance counselor had called me in for a meeting a week earlier, looked over my slipping grades, and asked, "Have you considered something more practical?" Sarah liked cosmetology. I walked out before she could finish her sentence. What no one understood was that I was being practical. I started by fixing old desktops for neighbors, just small things at first: virus removals, data recovery, cleaning dust from inside ancient towers that wheezed like dying animals. People would slide $20 bills into my hand and say things like, "You're better than Geek Squad," and I'd smile. Not because of the praise, but because it felt like the first time I was actually seen for what I could do. I got a part-time job at a tiny tech shop on the edge of town. The owner, Raj, was this grumpy but brilliant Indian man who spent more time with motherboards than with people. He saw my potential. "You're quiet, but your brain moves fast," he said once, handing me my first paycheck. I saved every cent. By 18, I had turned my parents' garage into my workshop. It smelled like metal, plastic, and faintly of WD-40. Shelves lined with salvaged parts, half-built rigs, and stacks of monitors towered over me like a shrine to resilience. My hands were constantly stained with grease and thermal paste, my nails always dirty, my hoodie sleeves permanently smudged, and I loved it. There was something sacred about the moment when a machine whirred to life after hours of work, the way the fan kicked on, the lights blinked, and the screen flashed. It was a language only I spoke, one that didn't require permission or approval. I started bidding on auctioned tech from bankrupt offices, whole pallets of discarded hardware. I'd spend nights stripping them down, soldering, tweaking, rebuilding. I sold them online or directly to families who couldn't afford new machines. I wasn't making a fortune, but I was making a difference. By the time I turned 20, I had 5 regular contractors, a small rented warehouse, and a loyal customer base. My little business, Bite Back Solutions, was pulling in steady revenue. I sent $2,500 to my parents every month without fail. Rent, groceries, repairs. They never asked where it came from. They never said thank you, but they stopped complaining about the power bill. At dinner one night, my mother said, "It's nice not worrying about the mortgage anymore." Then, almost as an afterthought, she looked at me and added, "Your little computer thing is fine, I suppose. Just don't expect it to last forever. It's not a real job." I swallowed the bitterness. I didn't argue. I just nodded and passed the salt. Things changed after James got married. Emily was polished, blonde, sharp-tongued. She worked in real estate and wore stilettos to backyard barbecues. From the moment we met, she looked at me like I was something sticky on the bottom of her shoe. "Still living in the garage?" she asked once with a smirk. I told her it was my office. Not that she cared. James started pulling away not long after the wedding. He stopped showing up at my workspace with Coke, stopped texting me memes. When I invited him to my warehouse's opening day, he said Emily had a brunch thing. I watched the photos later, mimosas, smiles, a world I didn't belong to. One night, I came home late, exhausted but elated. I had just secured my biggest order ever, 50 computers for a local school district. I practically floated into the house, gripping the printed email like a golden ticket. I wanted to tell James. Despite everything, part of me still believed he'd be proud. I paused in the hallway when I heard voices from the kitchen. "She just buries herself in that junk," Emily said. Her laugh was like glass breaking. "Honestly, I don't know how you grew up with her." James laughed too. "She's harmless, just weird. I mean, it's not like she has a real career. It's still just a bunch of scrap parts." I didn't go in. I didn't say a word. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding, that golden ticket crumpling in my hand. I should have been used to it by now, being underestimated, but hearing it from him, that cut deeper than I expected. I turned, walked back to my car, and drove to the warehouse. There, under the flickering fluorescent light, I sat at my workbench, unfolded the email, smoothed it out with shaking hands, and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. That night, I didn't cry. I rebuilt 3 towers from scratch, tuned 2 GPUs, and finalized an invoice for $18,000. And as the sun rose outside the warehouse windows, I looked at that email and whispered to myself, I don't need them to believe in me. I'll show them. It happened in the dead of winter, the kind of night where the snow falls thick and quiet, muffling the world like a heavy blanket, and the air stings your lungs with every breath. I was in my room, my garage, technically working late as usual. A new client wanted a batch of custom-built gaming PCs, and I had been obsessing over cooling systems all week. My space heater rattled in the corner, and my fingers were numb despite the gloves. But I didn't care. I was in the zone. Then came the knock. 3 short raps on the door. Not urgent, not polite, just final. I opened the door to find James standing there, wrapped in a thick coat, snowflakes clinging to his sleeves. His jaw was tight. He didn't smile. "Can we talk?" He didn't wait for an answer. He stepped inside, brushing snow from his boots like he still belonged in this space, like we still belonged to each other. "I'll get to the point," he said, his voice steady but cold. "Emily and I think it's time you moved out." I stared at him, blinking slowly, waiting for the punchline, but there was none. "What, you've been doing your own thing for years. You're an adult now. And honestly, it's getting crowded. Mom and Dad need peace. And Emily and I want to start our own family soon. You've had your chance. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice from cracking. You think I'm the problem in this house? It's not personal, he said quickly. It's just time. And one more thing about the will. I stiffened. Emily and I talked to Dad. We're going to take over managing things, finances, the house, all that. It makes sense. We're the ones here for them, so we're asking you to waive your share of the inheritance. You don't need it. Right, there it was. The knife. Not just a request to leave, but to erase myself completely. To pretend none of what I had done for this family ever mattered. I've been paying the bills, I said quietly. The mortgage, utilities, half the groceries every month. For years. You think Mom and Dad still have heat in winter because of you? James blinked. What are you talking about? I laughed. Sharp. Bitter. You never asked. No one ever asked. He looked uncomfortable for the first time, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. That's not the point. No. James, I said, my voice rising. It is the point. You're throwing me out of a house I've been financially holding up like a damn support beam, and you want me to just walk away from everything. There was silence, thick, suffocating. You should pack soon, he muttered, and walked out. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, feeling the last thread between us snap. The brother who once smuggled coke into my room, who defended me when others didn't, he was gone. That night, I made a choice. If they wanted me out, fine, but they wouldn't get to keep me and pretend I was never there. I went back inside the house, quiet as snow. The living room glowed with soft light, the flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, the sleek soundbar beneath it, the router blinking blue beside the couch, all of it. Mine. Bought, configured, maintained. I reset everything. Factory resets, BIOS locks, custom admin passwords wiped. The router would refuse every device by morning. The TV would be stuck in Chinese. Every device in the house, every screen, would become a silent monument to what they'd lost. I left a note on the kitchen table. For years, I supported this family not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because I loved you. You never saw me. Never asked how. Never said thank you. You think I was a burden. Maybe now you'll understand who was carrying who. Sarah. Then I packed. One suitcase, my tools, my laptop, the essentials. Everything else. Memories. Resentment. Childhood could stay. I zipped up my coat, stepped into the snow, and dragged my suitcase down the driveway. It was so quiet I could hear the crunch of every step. Just as I reached the gate, the front door creaked open. Emily's voice rang out behind me, high and cruel. Finally, we're rid of her. And then her laughter, bright and unbothered, cut through the still night air like glass. I didn't look back. I clenched my jaw, gripped the handle of my suitcase tighter, and walked into the dark. The snow kept falling, but the cold didn't touch me anymore. I had made my decision. I was done looking for love in places that only offered conditions. From this moment forward, I would build my own life with my own hands and never again beg to be understood. Freedom, as it turns out, doesn't come with fanfare. It doesn't burst through the doors with fireworks or parade music. Sometimes, it's just a girl unlocking the door to her new apartment, dragging a suitcase over scratched hardwood floors, and exhaling like she's breathing for the first time. My apartment in Columbus was small, studio-sized, with ceilings that creaked when my upstairs neighbor paced and windows that rattled when buses rolled by. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, no one knocked on the door to tell me I was too loud, or that I should be doing something useful. I strung soft LED lights across the walls and set up my workstation in the corner by the window, a folding table stacked with wires, processors, soldering tools, and a second-hand ergonomic chair that wobbled if I leaned too far. My desktop tower sat proudly on the floor, purring like a cat when I powered it up. I placed a tiny potted cactus beside it for no reason other than it made me smile. At night, I worked with music humming through the speakers, classic rock, ambient synth. Sometimes just the quiet hum of the city outside. I built machines, repaired broken dreams, answered emails from clients across the state. I was alone, yes, but I wasn't lonely, not anymore. In just 6 months, my business tripled in size. Word of mouth, social media posts, referrals. A teacher from a local community college invited me to speak about affordable tech access. A blogger featured my services in an article titled, "The Girl Who Builds Empires from Scrap." People started to see me. And yet, just when I began to believe I had truly started over, the past came clawing at my door. It started with a call from my mother. "Sarah," she said, her tone sharp, irritated like always. "The TV isn't working, and the internet is down. You need to come fix it." I blinked, stunned. "You know I don't live there anymore." "Well, you set it up. It's your mess. It's been months." "Mom." There was a long pause. Then, as if she couldn't understand why I wasn't leaping to her rescue, she said, "Don't be selfish. It's not like you're doing anything important." Something shifted in me. For years, I had equated love with sacrifice, measuring my worth by how useful I could be. But standing there, in my tiny kitchen with mismatched plates and a flickering fridge light, I finally said it. You'll need to hire someone. Mom. I charge market rate, just like any other client. She hung up without another word. A week later, my father called. He didn't yell. He didn't blame. He just sounded tired. Sarah, he said quietly, we're in trouble. He explained everything. After I left, the $2,500 I'd been sending stopped. James and Emily had burned through the family savings, maxed out credit cards, a failed real estate flip, bad loans. The house, the one I grew up in, was under foreclosure. They owed over $100,000. Utilities were past due. The fridge had broken. The car wouldn't start. We didn't know, he said. We didn't realize what you'd been doing all these years. For a long time. I didn't speak. My chest felt tight, not with anger, but something heavier, like grief. You want me to bail you out? I asked, already knowing the answer. I'm not asking for that, he said. I'm just asking for help. And God. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to fix everything like I always had. But something inside me had changed. I can't be the bandage anymore. Dad, I said softly. You raised me to be strong, and I am. But that strength isn't yours to spend. He didn't argue, just sighed. I understand. He hung up, and I stood there for a while, staring out the window at the streetlights flickering in the cold. My hands trembled, not with rage, but with the weight of everything I was finally letting go. That night, I lay awake in bed, listening to the radiator hiss. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a message from James. Sarah, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't see. Thank you for everything. I wish I had said it sooner. I stared at the screen for a long time. Tears welled up before I even realized they were coming. They slid down my cheeks silently, warm against the chill of the room. I didn't reply. Not because I hated him, but because I finally understood that forgiveness doesn't always require a conversation. Sometimes, it's just the quiet decision to stop carrying a weight that was never yours to begin with. And in that silence, in that stillness, I found something I never had before: peace. 5 years later. The snow still falls in Ohio, but now I watch it from the warmth of a sunlit kitchen, wrapped in a soft cardigan, with the smell of cinnamon toast in the air and the sound of tiny feet rushing down the stairs. Mom Daisy chewed my robot, my son yells, waving the half-eaten Lego limb in one hand, while his sister trails behind him in pink pajamas, giggling. Daisy, our overly affectionate golden retriever, sits proudly in the corner with the plastic piece still stuck to her tongue. I laugh, truly laugh, and pull him into a hug. She's trying to build her own, I say, brushing his messy hair back. Guess we'll have to teach her better coding. David enters the room right on cue, coffee in hand, his glasses slipping down his nose. Don't encourage the dog, he mutters, half amused, half resigned. He's a software engineer I met during a tech conference in Chicago 4 years ago. What started as shared fascination over quantum computing quickly turned into long night calls, a surprise trip to the coast, and one proposal during a thunderstorm that shorted out our hotel power. It was perfectly imperfect. He was the first person I met who didn't just understand my passion. He celebrated it. Together, we built everything from scratch: a quiet home in the suburbs just outside Columbus, 2 beautiful kids, a warm marriage, and a shared business that provides refurbished computers to low-income schools across the Midwest. Our garage now holds garden tools instead of servers. My workbench is inside a bright room with glass doors and sunlight. And my heart, for once, it's not guarded, but the past has a strange way of knocking, even when you think you've sealed every door. A few months ago, I did something I never thought I would. I hired a private investigator, not because I wanted revenge, not out of spite. I just needed to know. The report came in a plain white envelope, and I read it in silence while David sat beside me, his hand resting gently on mine. My parents now live in a modest rented apartment on the east side of town. No savings, no car. My mother occasionally cleans houses. My father works part-time at a used bookstore. The home I grew up in, gone. James is stuck in a bitter divorce with Emily, who left him for a real estate investor in Arizona. The court documents revealed more than I asked for: medical records, statements, and a painful truth: James is infertile. The final blow to my parents' dream of grandchildren. That night, David looked at me and said gently, "Do you want to reach out to them?" I thought about it. Truly. And then I shook my head. "I'm not ready," I whispered, "and I don't owe them my peace." David didn't press. He never does. He just pulled me close and kissed the top of my head. "They don't deserve you," he said, "but you do deserve peace." I've come to learn that healing isn't loud. It's not a climactic moment. It's waking up in a home that feels like safety. It's telling your story and not flinching. It's learning to say no without guilt, to set boundaries without apology. One morning, I was tidying the bookshelf in my office when I found it an old wooden box I hadn't opened in years. Inside, beneath faded birthday cards and childhood sketches, was an envelope, my father's handwriting. The letter was short. Sarah, I don't know how to undo the damage we caused. I only know that I'm sorry. I see you now. I wish I had seen you sooner. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Love. Dad. I held it in my hands for a long while. My chest ached, not with anger, but with memory. I slipped the letter back into the box and closed it. Later that evening, David saw the box on my desk. Are you going to write him back? He asked gently. I smiled. Not sadly, but with a calmness I'd never had before. One day, I said, maybe. But right now, I'm choosing us. I'm choosing me. That night, after the kids went to bed, I stood in front of the mirror. The same mirror I used to stare into with doubt and shame. But now, the woman looking back was someone else entirely. Not broken, not burdened, not waiting to be seen, just whole. I smiled at my reflection, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I was simply living the life I had built with love, with truth, with peace, and that was more than enough.